So I listen to a lot of different podcasts and I listen to a lot of different YouTubers. I listen to a lot of different formats of political conversation. And a lot of the more casual formats of political conversation I find don't really do it for me. They frustrate me more than anything else. I'm really more interested in the stuff that's a little bit more hard, informative, policy advocacy. My ideal content is sort of a persuasive essay on why we should X, but translated into a YouTube video or an audio format so that I don't have to read, because I hate reading. When I was listening to a podcast, it was QAnon Anonymous. It's pretty well known on the left podcast. They tend to, follow QAnon as a group and anybody adjacent to them, and just sort of criticize them as a movement and keep track of them and ask themselves how people end up in a place where they end up joining something like QAnon, all the different paths that one could take to end up in something like QAnon. And they were talking about a protest. I believe it was a protest against Disney for LGBT stuff in Disney content or in Disney movies. Personally, I don't think there's enough LGBT stuff in Disney movies. Why haven't Elsa and Anna kissed? They're gay and I know it. They're gay and I know it. Yeah, I'm not sure there's enough stuff in there personally, but they seemed to think that there was too much, this particular group of people. And so, you've got some very religious, I'll say homophobic people there talking about this, and a lot of the people there, it very clearly went beyond just like, we don't want to see too many wokeness, right? It wasn't just, oh, I feel like you put gay people in this movie for woke points, rather than for like legitimate story fueling reasons, which I think is potentially a legitimate criticism of movies and art sometimes. I do think some lazy creators do put in minorities just to be like, woo, minorities, woo hoo hoo. I don't think you should necessarily react negatively every single time you see a minority and assume that it's an inorganic thing every single time, but it's a difficult line to walk there. Either way, there were people there who had clearly gone sort of beyond that and were just generally homophobic and were uninterested in gay people sort of existing. And one group of those people, they had a lot of little kids stand up and like read Bible verses and stuff, right? So they got little kids, 10, 11 years old or something, talking into a megaphone saying homophobic things. And the opinion of the QAnon Anonymous commentators was like, look how disgusting this indoctrination is. This is a sick, worldview, and they're indoctrinating children. But it was kind of a weird conversation because they would oscillate back and forth between talking about how ridiculous it is for them to be accusing the left of indoctrinating children into like pro-LGBT stuff, and then getting very, very mad at the right-wing people for indoctrinating children into anti-LGBT stuff. And it just, the whole thing gave me a little bit of whiplash, personally. So I'm just going to say, on principle, I disagree with this overall mentality. I think that you should indoctrinate children. I think that indoctrinate's a strong word, but you should absolutely bring children to protests, allow children to participate in politics. You're never too young to start engaging with things. And I think this becomes a thing where like both sides think the other side is like evil whenever children get involved. They're like, oh, you have these horrible ideas and now you're involving children in your horrible ideas. And I think if we all just took a step back, we'd realize, well, no, I went to a climate rally at one point, and there was this woman who was a mother, and she's like, well, I'm very passionate about this. I want there to be a world for my children. I'm doing this for my children. And my children can participate. They do little hand painting things, right? And they'll cover their hands in green paint maybe, and they'll put it on a sign, to save the climate for the kids or what have you. There's a way in which children can participate, and also it just seems to me like when we start developing this mentality that children shouldn't be a part of this because we don't want to come off like we're indoctrinating them, we end up in a place where we're pushing away the exact type of people that we want more of in a political movement right now. I think what we want less of is 20-somethings who came fresh out of college with a strong ideological framework and just want to stand on the side of the street with a sign really passionately. You know, what we need more of is ordinary people from all walks of life, including, I should certainly hope, single mothers and so on, people, parents with children and lives who are busy, and those people are going to want to bring their children. So yeah, on principle, I think it is good to bring children to protests, and I'm not going to criticize people on the other side for doing something that I would do on my side, on principle. I think that's a stupid way to exist, to turn everything into a complete double standard where it's bad when the other guy does it because the other guy's bad. So yeah, I think that's a good principle. I also think there's kind of a second layer to this too, of a lot of these extra criticisms. I feel like they just pad out the runtime and make it so that you don't actually have to have very interesting opinions, because this episode of this podcast or whatever is how many ever hours long of coverage, and they have to cover what's going on, and I think there's only so many ways they could come up with saying I disagree with their homophobia, and I don't think they put a lot of effort into articulating why they disagree with their homophobia. In fact, it almost felt like their opinion was that that argument doesn't need to be said, right? It just is bad, and you know why it's bad, and if you're watching us, you know why it's bad, and we're not going to explain why it's bad to anybody who disagrees with us or thinks that it's not bad, right? So that part, the important part, right? The important part, explaining why the people you disagree with are wrong to believe what they believe, that gets shoved off to the side and not really talked about very much. But then the part about how sick it is that they're bringing their children into their worldview, that ends up somehow taking up more time than the central issue, right? If the central issue is going to be my side is right and your side is wrong, so when my side brings children to protests, it's bringing children into civic responsibility and fighting for justice. And when your side does it, it's bringing children into hate and bigotry. If that's going to be the argument, then you need to spend more time on the why my side is right and your side is wrong part of things, I think. So I also think it's just a lot of these positions end up being a way to pad out runtime for content creators who don't have as much to say as I would like to believe I do. So take that, other content creators. I have more to say than you.